All right, folks, welcome back. Thank you for having me, Sunny and Vechain team. I appreciate the hospitality. That was going to happen. That was perfectly timed. I'm a huge fan of Sir Nobel Laureates' work, so thank you again for that. Folks, look, before I get into it, I got to say something. I have never been to Vegas before. People look at me funny when I say that. It's not because I have something against Vegas. In fact, I love Vegas, and I love everything Vegas has to offer. But here's the thing. The fact that you all showed up, I think, is a huge deal. Not to Vegas, but to here. Because Woody Allen says showing up is 50% of the battle, but showing up to hear me speak while you have all the distractions of Vegas is like 9% of the battle. The fact that you're here to engage on the real issues, the solutions, the problems, and how we take things forward, I think is impressive. I've got two jobs, two very simple jobs. The first is to talk about the nature of the problem that we face, okay? And the second is to talk about how we're going to address it. And underpinning that is actually a tone of optimism, because it's easy to get depressed. It's very easy to look at the magnitude of what faces the planet and look at the vexing nature of the humanitarian and planetary crisis that besieges us and just lose hope. It's very easy, okay? But I want something different. I want something different from us. When we walk home tomorrow to the airport or to the train or to our cars, I want us to walk confidently, with optimism, with hope, because I don't want slouched shoulders. I don't want negativity. Because if not you, the people who in Vegas show up to engage on solutions, if you're not going to be the ones that carry hope and optimism about the future, then who? Okay? So here we go. This polar bear is losing its habitat, as are we. And the difference between us and this polar bear is we can do something about it. And we can do something about it for ourselves and for the polar bear, okay? Now, BCG, the organization I represent, trying to go back on my slides, hitting the red button. Can someone take me to the top of the deck, please? It's the very top. I'll do that again, yeah. Perfect. Okay, let me just say a word about who I am in BCG. So BCG, we're thrilled to have this partnership with Vechain. More importantly, as an organization like Vechain, we are committed to sustainability. We are a 25,000 person large organization, and of all of the stuff that we could be spending our time on, sustainability is top of the agenda for us. We've made a C-suite level commitment around this topic, and yes, that means we do great client work on the topic, but more importantly, my colleagues and I, many of whom are here today, are immersing ourselves around the tables where the solutions to some of the vexing problems are being kicked around. And partnering with an organization like Vechain is absolutely part of the solution. And why do we care so much? We care so much because of this. Okay, so take this in. This is the carbon particles per million in the atmosphere. And for centuries, for millennia, it was pretty much flat in the high 200s. At 450, we're at a 2-degree warming scenario. Bad stuff starts to happen. Now, bad stuff is already happening. We're already 1 degree hotter than pre-industrial levels. Why? Because if you look at the hockey stick inflection in the amount of carbon that we release each year, it explains some of the issues that we're seeing, rising sea levels, other weather events, resulting in massive dislocations of communities, people, and broader economic dislocation. Now, at 450 at 2 degrees, at 430, 1.5 degrees, which is the high water mark where scientists want us to be to have a sustainable future. And yesterday we were at 421. Yesterday we were at 421. Okay? Now, everyone always talks about what it does to the planet. What does it do to us? What does it do to you when you are in an environment with high carbon? They ran this study where they had 2 groups, a control and a not control, running math problems. And they started to introduce carbon into the room of one of the rooms, not the control room. And what they found is once you get to carbon levels that are where we might find ourselves in 2075, and that might sound far away, right? 2075? People in this room will be alive. Some of you in this room, I see some of you young people in this room, will be alive in 2075. Your kids will certainly be alive in 2075, 2100. So these are not far out projections. This is going to happen in the lifetime of people that are already on this planet. Their cognitive ability, the people in that room with carbon that matches the intensity of what you find in those rooms, in that version of the planet, was impaired by 20%. 20% impairment of cognitive. We never talk about this. We always talk about the planet. And so as the crisis mounts, our intelligence and ability to deal with it gets challenged. And so this reality is something we need to embrace. But remember I said, we're going to be optimistic. I said it was easy to get depressed. I saw some of you look depressed and are about to head to the slots. Don't do it. Stay with me. We got this, okay? All right. So, if we're going to do anything about this, there's 6 actors that need to engage. They're listed here. You're one of them, individuals. Now, many of you represent maybe public policy organizations. Maybe you represent individual corporations. But at the heart of it is also individuals in the community. That's what I love about Vechain, how it talks about the community. Right? The individuals have a role here too. But let's go through each of these, and I'm going to hit the headlines because I want us to catch up on time a bit. Number 1, governments. Every year, you see in the Secretary Kerry photo ops, and I'm a huge fan of Secretary Kerry, so I'm not trying to get political on you, but you see the annual photo ops where heads of state show up at some city where the COP is being hosted, COP 26, COP 27, COP 28 this year. And what's happening at COP is individual countries are making climate commitments. They're making pledges. They're saying, we're going to cut carbon in our country by this level. And the belief is that if countries come together and make those commitments, we're going to bring the line down to the 1.5 degree scenario, the scenario where we need the world to be by 2050 so that we can have a sustainable planet going forward, a net zero future. By 2050, no new carbon into the atmosphere, okay? And everybody comes out of these COPs celebrating all the pledges that were made, but every year we refresh this slide, and at the last COP, which was 5 months ago, we're at the red line. So and that's just the pledges. So if the countries do what they said they'll do, and by the way, the heads of state making these pledges, they'll be gone by the time the day of reckoning comes. But if they do what they said they'll do, we're at the red line. Look at the chasm between the red line and the green line. Okay, so that's what this is about. That's what we're going after. And the good news is, despite some of the limitations of the pledges, we're seeing a lot of dollars flowing into the space. Again, I don't want to get political, but this is watershed legislation, right? The IRA, which by the way, I don't think does anything to reduce inflation, but it's called the Inflation Reduction Act. It does a lot to pour money into the climate crisis. And so much so that other countries got quite threatened by this, because what it meant was that if you want to invest in clean tech or in green infrastructure, suddenly the economics of doing so in the United States became very attractive. I serve global pools of capital, investors from around the world, and suddenly the US became this hotspot. Everybody wanted to come in. Carbon capture, green hydrogen, green ammonia became hot. So what happened? The EU is going to match. They've just announced a Green Deal. And so you have this virtuous race to the top among markets to push capital into the solution. And a lot of that capital is going into clean technology, which is, I know, a space where a lot of you have deep interest, enthusiasm in some spaces where you traffic. The second group we need to get on with it is the private sector. This chart is actually quite encouraging if you look at the top half, which is last year, the number of companies that made a science-based commitment, which means I'm going to bring down my company's emissions, the carbon my company releases into the atmosphere every year, I'm going to bring that number down in line with what science requires for us collectively to get to 1.5 degree scenario. The number doubled last year. But when you scratch under the hood to see if anything's being done, 90% of the companies, 90% of these 4,400 are off track, okay? And you're like, hey, but you said we're going to be optimistic. We're going to be optimistic now. This is why I feel optimistic. We did this study last year with the World Economic Forum where we looked at 8 supply chains. 8 supply chains that collectively contribute 50% of global emissions. So if you took all of the carbon we collectively put into the atmosphere every year, 50% comes from these 8 supply chains. Okay, food, construction, fashion, etc. And what we found, which was really exciting for us, is that you can take out 80% of the emissions today. The first 40 you can take out for a cost that is less than $10 per ton of carbon. And a lot of that 40 you can take out in a way that's actually economic for your business. Even more so now, and this was pre-IRA, so it's even more economic now. But at the time, the first 40% you can take out at a price of less than $10 per ton, and a big chunk of that in a way that's actually economic. That will save you money. The next 40%, we talked about the first 40, the next 40 costs somewhere between $10 and $100. And so the introduction of a price on carbon gets you there. The last 20% requires technologies that are either in their infancy and need to scale, and so we've learned about some of those today, earlier before the break, or technologies that don't yet exist. Okay? So that's a place from which one can draw courage. The other place one can draw courage from is this chart, which is the amount of money flowing into clean technology is climbing at a very aggressive clip. So I mentioned I serve pools of capital. Last year, if you were out fundraising for a private equity fund or a venture fund, not for a company, but for a fund, fundraising was down 30%. It was a hard year to raise capital. But if you were a climate fund or a sustainability fund, fundraising was up 40%. So the amount of interest from people with money, institutions with money, to pour money into this sector is growing quite aggressively despite a tough fundraising environment. But the issue is, so that's the positive. The issue is, remember that 1.5 degree line, the green line that we're all gunning for? To get to that green line, we need an 8x increase in the amount of capital flowing into this space. So despite the fact that it was 30% growth versus it still needs to increase year over year by 8x. And so if you're in the space with a new venture or a startup looking for capital, you're in a great spot because money's flowing in. But if you're thinking about this at a systems level, the gap is still quite meaningful. Then there's the individual, consumers. Everyone's talking about, a lot of young people are posting on TikTok or Insta about their, ecologically friendly this or that. And that's good, that's a nice trend, but it's only less than 10% of consumers for whom sustainability is the number one purchase criteria across categories. But the good news is that if you couple sustainability with other dimensions, convenience, affordability, quality, the number actually shoots up. And so what we need here is both sides. Companies to respond to this reality, because a lot of executives will still tell you, oh no, consumers won't pay for green. This proves that it's not true. And it's every day it's less true. So consumers are moving, the community is moving, individuals are moving. And I think individuals creating that global demand, insisting that products be cleaner and greener and lower carbon is going to be an input. But then companies stepping in is the other. And the last one I'm going to hit is collective action. So much of the narrative when you talk to private sector about this issue is my company, my sustainability, my commitment. But like I said, this is a systems level problem. And what it really begs for is collective action. And I'll give you one example. 2 days ago in New York, we announced our partnership with the EDCI, the ESG Data Convergence Initiative. It's the third one on the right. And I'll tell you what that is. So for a long time, you have public companies and private companies. Public companies, tons of transparency. They disclose, investors can ask for information, their stock is widely held, every quarter they have to report results. Compare that to private equity, privately owned companies. None of that is true. There's 1, 2, maybe 3 owners at most. It's all very opaque and intransparent. And that's not a bad thing per se. It's a context in which private companies can do a lot of good. But the issue that we saw was that $1 trillion of high carbon businesses were divested over a decade, and 90% of that divestment ended up in private hands. Because as public companies came under pressure for, hey, you got to cut your carbon. What's your net zero plan? What are you doing about emissions? An easy out was, gosh, I'll just sell it. I don't want this headache. I don't want this high carbon business. I'll sell it. And who came in and picked it up? Private equity. So the big concern became, gosh, private equity is going to become the place where bad assets go to hide. And they go to hide because nobody is accountable. There's no transparency. And so the fact that this industry that's been known for opacity and secrecy committed, the whole sector, $20+ trillion, 275 global GPs and LPs, some of the biggest names in the industry, collectively put their hands together and said, we, starting this year already, we're getting the data at BCG, are going to start disclosing our ESG data. 15 different metrics: sustainability, climate, human rights, workplace safety. They're going to share that information on their companies in a verified way and start benchmarking themselves, start creating some accountability. That's collective action. That's what we need to push in the sector. So now look at this list. Look at this list. This is all of what we need if we have any hope of getting back on that green line. And as you stare at this list, it's easy to start getting a little discouraged, because this is a lot. This seems monumental. And how are we going to get all of these actors, governments, companies, coalitions, individuals to start moving in this direction? Okay? But anybody who's ever gone negative on our ability, who's going short on human ingenuity, is a bet that I wouldn't want to take, because I'll give you a few examples. Not one, but 2 COVID vaccines in less than 12 months, right? Nuclear energy. Nuclear is a source of energy everywhere. Stuff that we just thought wouldn't be possible. Everyone connected everywhere all the time. You know how in 2003 they said, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? Well, that was before social media, okay? Now they say what happens anywhere in Vegas is known everywhere outside of Vegas, because we're connected, all of us, all the time, okay? The auto industry, right? Road vehicles, deemed impossible, right? Next day, and in some markets, same day delivery. This is my favorite quote. This is the professor of the guy who went and founded FedEx. Told him that he'd get a C for this crazy idea. And even in climate, we're pessimistic on climate technologies. And so if you're in the trenches coming up with a startup, with a new idea, a new concept, you have to contend with so much it's not possible, it's not going to happen. And here's the proof of why those voices are wrong, why you need to quash those voices and ignore the haters. This chart basically, in a nutshell, says the following. You know what it says? It says we consistently underestimate adoption and we consistently overestimate future cost. So whenever there's a new technology, we say it's going to take forever for it to actually gain traction in the market, and it's going to always be expensive, right? And look at any of these examples: solar, wind, batteries. The data on these, and I could have had 6 other examples, the data is consistent. And I'm going to conclude with a story, because everyone loves a good story. Even in pro cycling, I don't know how many cyclists we have with us, but the common wisdom, if you want to be better at cycling, what's the play? Well, work out more, practice more, lean into your turns better, get a better bike, better air pressure, diet. But no one ever says, when it comes to pro cycling, sit differently. Sit differently. Because we're 200 years in. How could you possibly innovate how you said? But not so, said Matej Mohoric, a Slovenian cyclist, who in 2013, after years and years of innovation, decided, you know what? I'm going to sit differently. And yeah, it looks ridiculous, but he didn't care, because he felt invincible as he blew past the competition and won the U23 World Championship. And you know what this is called? This is called the Super Tuck. It's a crazy name and it looks ridiculous. It's called the Super Tuck. And he owned it, okay? Now look at this list again. Look at this list again. Is that voice still in your head saying, no, man, we can't do this. We don't have hope? Well, mute that. You know what? Don't mute it. tell that voice to go super tuck it. Just tell it. Go super tuck it. It's like appropriate version of cursing at someone. Go super tuck it, right? Like if someone tells you you're never going to scale your business, what do you say? Go super tuck it. Someone says, we're never going to solve the planetary crisis. What do we say? We say go super tuck it. Go super tuck it. It's so therapeutic. Say it. Go super, whisper it. And no one's going to listen. Just go super. It's like a good feeling. In fact, you know what? It's Vegas. You were out late last night. I'm going to try something out. Don't let me down because it's being broadcast. On 3, we're all going to say, go super. You ready? You ready? Who's ready? You ready? Ready, Rock Casino Resort? Let's do it. 1, 2, 3. Oh my gosh, that was good. I thought we'd have to do 3 tries, but you nailed the first one. So look, if this is going to be our anthem, if Go Super Tuck It is going to be our anthem, anytime tells us that we're being too audacious, that we're being too bold, that we're being too ambitious, that we're being too optimistic, that we're being too naive, then we need to know what happened to Matej. Well, the Cycling Federation said, sorry, bud, your whole super tuck is too dangerous, and we're going to ban it. 2021, they banned it. You know what Matej said? Go super tuck it. And you know what he did? He went back to his lab, his garage, started innovating, trying new things out. And he decided, he figured it out. He said, I'm going to take my hydraulic airdropper, which is tech that's used in mountain biking, and I'm going to move it to my road bike. And yeah, it added a few grams on the ascent, but on the downhills, he was an aerodynamic bullet. And he went on last year to win the San Remo 180-mile grueling ride. And this is what the tech looks like. So folks, I want us to know that even though I have this message of optimism, which I don't want us to lose, the crisis is real. The solutions are going to require a lot of hustle and a lot of work. But this optimism that I'm pushing us to embrace and own is our only way out, and I'm confident that we'll get there. And I'm going to now call up my dear friend and partner, Guy, who's one of the most talented partners at BCG, manages our global relationship with Vechain, is behind the white paper that Sunny mentioned, to talk about how companies like Vechain are going to be part of the solution. And with that, I thank you very much.